Well. Happy New Year, book connectors. Yes, Happy New Year to one and all. Happy 2026. I hope this year finds you all well, and belated Merry Christmas as well. Just happy holidays all around. And welcome back to the Book Connection. I am your host, Black Devil, and this time I am here with the video for the book Finding Love in the Land of Alzheimer's, One Daughter's Hopeful Story by author and journalist Lauren Kessler. Okay, if by some chance a non-subscriber should come across this video, I think I'd better go ahead and give definitions for the words dementia and Alzheimer's, although I think we pretty much all know what they are. I did a Google search because anything can be found on the web, so that's where I took the definition for dementia. But I went on Alzheimers.com and got the definition for Alzheimer's. So, by definition, the word dementia means that there is a progressive or persistent loss of intellectual and mental functioning, especially impairment of memory and abstract thinking. Now, Alzheimer's, like I say, I got this from Alzheimers.com, and it is described once again as a progressive or persistent generalized degeneration mentally of the brain. Now, for me personally, both of those words are interchangeable. But if I have to say, and I don't have any medical degrees or letters behind my name, but anyway, like I said, they are interchangeable to me. But if I had to say the difference between the two, number one, Alzheimer's is known to occur mainly in middle age and or old age. Also, Alzheimer's is also the most common form of premature senility. But the only difference between the two words as far as the definition goes, for me, is from the time a person is diagnosed with dementia to it being called Alzheimer's. Usually by the time Alzheimer's hits, or this has been the case in my family anyway, it's just a deeper, further breakdown of your memory impairment and intellectual learning. And so that is what I want to talk about in this particular video. Forgive me if I sound like I'm being a bit textbookish, but this book, to me, it was very heartfelt. It was personable, and the author, Lauren Kessler, if you don't know or if you didn't know, like I didn't know, she lost her mom to Alzheimer's. So this is what basically this video is going to be about this go around. So settle back and let's listen, learn, and by all means, let's try to remember. So, research scientists and doctors have a lot of factors that they look at when determining whether or not we have a disease. And with that being said, Alzheimer's is no different. Now, this book was released in 2007. And at that time, she, meaning Lauren Kessler, listed 6 things that lean toward people less likely to have or Alzheimer's. And so those are the 6 I'm listing now. One of them is people who exercise on a regular basis tend not to develop it. People who have regular mental stimulation, in other words, basically just knowing what's going on in the world around them, people who had active social lives also are less likely to develop it. Now, people who drink alcohol in moderation are usually less likely to develop it. People who don't smoke or people who do not eat red meat. Now, in Laura's case, unfortunately, her mother did all of them. She didn't exercise. She, up until the last 20 plus years of her life, she did have regular mental stimulation as well as an active social life. Now, when it started slowing down, you know how it is when you get a diagnosis and you start to think back and, what was the last time I knew mom to do such and such, or, so she eventually stopped getting mental stimulation or having a social life at all. She did. She was very fond of drinking. She did also smoke. She also ate red meat. So, her mom met all of those. Now, I wonder, because she also says that women, they live long in her family. I think it was her great-grandmother that died in her bed at age 104, somewhere along in there. And then at the time this book was being written, her mom herself was in her 80s, or, had just turned 80. So that also played a lot. I think what was said was that by her meeting all of those, it was no surprise that she came down with it. Now, obviously, you don't have to meet any of them and still come down with it. But these are markers that doctors have learned that kind of make it less likely that you develop it. And in my family, my grandmother was 85 when she was diagnosed, and she lived 7 years. She was 91 when she passed away. So, okay, she died in 2010. Now, her son, my mother's brother, was diagnosed with it at age 68. Now, I know my grandmother didn't exercise, but I know my uncle did. They both had mental stimulation. My grandmother was very chatty. And they both had active social lives. My uncle was an outdoorsman type person. Even when he retired, that's what he did. He played golf. He was on a team or a league, whatever, and he traveled. That's what he did. My grandmother was into the church, on different committees in the church, so they both had active social lives. And then my uncle would drink, but his would be in moderation because he didn't need anything that was going to affect his golf game. So he did, like I said, he would have a drink, but it wouldn't be often. Now, my grandmother would have a drink, but I honestly believe my grandmother had no alcohol for like the last 40 years of her life. I just don't think she did. Could be wrong, but if I am, it's not that much. She might have gone 35 or 45 years, but I rounded to 40 years. So they both did drink in moderation, and they both smoked. But by the time they stopped smoking, heck, I forgot they ever did smoke. I don't know how old they were when they started. My grandmother and her son. But when I came along, I can honestly say the last time I knew my grandmother to smoke, and they were one because my granddaddy was the same way. They could buy a pack of cigarettes and have them for like a week and a half. Now, I hear people talking about smoking 2 packs a day, every day, and some smoke way more. But either way it goes, I was not 10 when they stopped smoking. And then they both ate red meat. And what was the other one? Yeah, that was it. So I guess when Laura's mother had all 6 of those, although my family had 2.5 or 3 of those that ruled it out, they both still ended up developing Alzheimer's. That's why you can't necessarily go by everybody, because everybody's case really okay, so you all different. May keep hearing me repeat the year this book was released, which was in 2007. The reason I am doing so is because data changes literally sometimes overnight. So what was true 18 years ago may not necessarily be true now. Let's just look at the number of people who had been diagnosed with it back in 2007. In the U.S. alone, there were over 4.5 million people who had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Now you fast forward that 18 years later, and we have over 7 million people who are afflicted with Alzheimer's. So that's why I keep mentioning the year that the book was written, because things change over time. So now I want to talk about the stages of Alzheimer's. Now, again, in 2007, there were 4 stages of Alzheimer's, and so I want to discuss each one of the stages and then what happens during each stage. But before I go into those, there is yet one other theories doctors looked at when trying to define another version, or not necessarily another version, it's just another look at Alzheimer's, and it's something along the lines of Alzheimer's is still defined as a decline in mental functioning and abstract thinking. But they're saying that when we get so far gone, there becomes a regression of 4 different stages of life that we have successfully conquered growing up. Maybe it's tying and untying your shoe. Maybe it's dressing yourself. Maybe it's feeding yourself. Maybe it's driving. But whatever it is, you did it and didn't give 2 thoughts about it. Well, now that you have Alzheimer's, now you're starting to, well, some people do it slowly, but then you do have a few cases where it can be very aggressive. So now I want to discuss each of the stages of Alzheimer's. There are 4 stages of Alzheimer's, and each stage has sub-stages or subcategories or sub-whatever that we find in each one of the stages. And I will attempt to name them all, and very, very importantly for me anyway, is what to look for within each one of the stages. Okay, so stage 1 of Alzheimer's is called early phase. And in this phase, adult learning is lost. They lose whatever the most recent acquired skill they had. So, say they learned how to make a pancake. Well, it's good. You make it, you eat it, it's good, blah, blah, blah. But then the next time you go to prepare it, you have drastically forgotten how to perform the steps of making said pancake. Another thing they do is they struggle to find quite the right word. You know how it's like they know what they want to say, but it just won't come to them as easily as it did before this happened. The third thing they do is they start to lose interest in the world around them or current events or whatever. Then what was the other thing? Oh, they become indifferent to niceties afforded most adults, especially seniors. So say you bump into someone and you may say, "Excuse me, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that." Before this happens, you might would say, "Oh, that's okay, that's okay." But because you're in this phase or stage, you don't know to say that. And so that's why they call it indifference to niceties afforded most seniors or adults. So now we're in stage 2 of Alzheimer's. This stage is known as early mid-phase. And in here, adolescent learning is lost. So in this stage or phase, your ability to retain or recall information has been severely impaired. You forget routines, or they forget routines. Sometimes they have done their whole life long, so it's just completely forgotten. And then they also have angry outbursts, hence the word adolescent. In Alzheimer's circles, adolescent learning, or those angry outbursts, I should say. The third stage of Alzheimer's is known as late mid-phase. And in this phase or stage, childhood learning is lost. They become disoriented to everything, every time or place or memory or thing. It seems to be moderately wiped out in the beginning. And in my family, this is the very first stage that we seem to notice most anything that's going on. And then their language is reverted back to simple words or repetition, simple sentences, things like that. And modesty, you can hang that one up. It's out the window. I don't know that they ever give thought or time to, remember that some things are private. They just, whatever you see is what you saw. Okay, so the last phase or stage of Alzheimer's, stage number 4, is known as late mid phase. And in this phase, infancy memory has been lost. This is when they revert back. They become incontinent. They don't know how to dress themselves. They can't feed themselves. Whatever it is that you did as an adult, all of that is severely wiped out. This is known in Alzheimer's circles as failure to thrive, just like babies, because they have forgotten so much. That's so sad. So now that I have spoken about all of the things that I took away from the book, now let's go in and tell the story part of the book. Lauren Kessler was the older of two children. She has a younger brother, or has, I'm not sure. But they grew up in New York. When her brother graduated high school, he moved cross country and settled in Florida, and he began building a life there. She too had thought that she would leave and not look back. Now, according to Laura, her parents did not have a happy or good marriage at all, and it sounds like she butted heads with both parents at different times throughout her life. Now, her mother, the reason she wrote the book is because her mother died from Alzheimer's 8 years before she wrote the book. She was left with guilt because she felt like she should have been there more than she was for her mom. So at some point, now the parents at this time are still living in New York. And when they started noticing little things, I don't think Lauren was there, but her dad would tell her things, and I don't know, maybe she picked up on her mom's conversation not making sense sometimes. I don't know. But I do know that she said the 8 years before her mother passed away, she had only been in her presence for 18 hours. And that only happened when she convinced her father to let her take her mom and put her in a facility close to where she lived so she could run and check on her every day and sit and have lunch with her and learn things along the way. And at first, he wouldn't. And she said, although they did not have a happy marriage, when it really counted, he just forwent everything. She said it was easy. She grew up middle class. And she said it would have been very easy for him to just put his mother, or her mother rather, his wife, into a home and never look back. He could have gone out on the dating scene and would have had any number of takers, but he didn't. He stayed with his wife, and he learned how to cook, how to clean, how to run a vacuum, and that is to his credit, according to her, and I definitely agree that was to his credit. So, I think maybe when she finally convinced her dad to let her try keeping her with her, she was like, Dad, you're getting on up in age. You are starting to have some health concerns yourself. So just let me take Mom, and if it gets to be too much, she'd always come home. So when he finally agreed, she paid for a private nurse to fly with her mom from New York to Oregon, where she is living now. She said when they got to the airport to pick her up, she just sat in the car and she just kept saying, Mom, you remember me, don't you? I'm Lauren. I'm your only daughter. Lauren, you remember me. And Tom, you remember my husband. This is Tom. And her mother never did seem to know who either one of them was. So they get home, and she decides that her mom is probably tired from being on a plane. I don't know, I can't remember how many hours, but it was more than 2. So she decided to just get her ready for bed. She went in and looked in her suitcase. And whatever facility the dad put the mom in the night before she was to fly to Lauren, she said she opened her mother's suitcase and got a gown out. But the gown was very flimsy and papery feeling. So she went to her room and got a long sleeve flannel gown that she knew her mom would like. And she put that on. Well, she went in there and put it on the bed. And she told her mom, I'm going to give you time to get dressed and I'll come back and get you. She went back like 10, 15 minutes later. And her mom was sitting in the same spot, still completely dressed. And it dawned on her that perhaps she didn't know how to undress anymore. So she undressed her mom, put her gown on, and she helped her get into bed. And the only thing her mother said was, I'm probably not going to sleep. So Lauren sat there and held her mother's hand until she went to sleep. So then the next morning, Lauren gets up, goes downstairs where her mother was sleeping, goes in there, her mother is not in the room. And you know, her first thought was, oh my gosh, she's gotten out of the house. But she decided to go through the house anyway, and there she found her mother in the kitchen. This woman had never, ever set foot in Lauren's house before. But she had a moment of clarity at some point because Lauren said that her mother had gone in the kitchen and fixed herself some toast and coffee. Now, growing up, she said her mother was, well, I'm saying her mother sounds like she could have worked for, wasn't it a magazine? It may still be. I'm not really into those. But I can remember one called House Beautiful. And I think they just go to show you, like, all types of home decorating and meals to prepare. She said her mother, her house was immaculate growing up. And she cooked. She was a gourmet cook. She taught herself how to prepare authentic Chinese food. And all of this went on. And her father, oh yeah, please forgive me for reading a book about Alzheimer's and forgetting what what kind of work her father did. But he had some white-collar job, and he made enough money so that she didn't work if she did not want to. He gave her an allowance every time he got paid, which was every 2 weeks. But eventually, things started to happen with their mom or, you know, their parents. Dad noticed, everybody noticed little things at first. Like, he got paid every 2 weeks. Well, at some point, he realized that she was drinking more than she should or more than he felt she should anyway. Then she said that they did try to keep them, the children, Lauren and her brother, from hearing arguments and stuff. But Lauren said she would hear them through the walls. I guess her bedroom was close to her parents, but she would overhear, you know, mumbling and stuff. And he eventually took one of her allowances away. Instead of giving her money every 2 weeks, he was giving it to her once a month. And I think he decreased what he was giving her because it seemed to all be going in alcohol. Then she said she got to where she started having fender benders. Now, according to Lori, her dad stopped her mother from driving. He pulled her license, her keys, because she had more than one. No one was hurt, thankfully, but he knew she didn't need to be behind the wheel. Now, at this time, I think he just thought that she was just an alcoholic. But at some point, she did start going. Well, she probably always did go to doctors. But I don't know who introduced it. I don't know if it was her dad or if the doctor bought subtle changes to her dad's attention. It doesn't sound like Lauren or her brother had much to do with her parents, or their parents rather, when it came to going to the doctors and stuff. But eventually, she was after. It takes. Well, I know in my family, they always said it takes approximately 2 years before they can make an accurate diagnosis whether or not you have Alzheimer's. So within that 2-year span of time, she just kept living her life, and then she was doing just enough that was normal for her, that where everybody really wasn't a lot of people being alarmed. Like she says, her mother used to make her all of her ball gowns, whatever cotillion, or if she was a debutante or whatever, her mother made every one of her gowns. She was such a great seamstress that she even made a whole wardrobe of clothes just for one of Laura's baby dolls. She even would, she did something because the mother, she was an amateur painter of still lives. And she went and designed something she did to some wings on an airplane, a real live airplane, one time. So she was very, 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 very creative. And nothing was ever out of place, especially from the outside looking in. But whenever, the Alzheimer's set in, and she eventually got to the place to where she used to be very social. And then she just started, for one reason or another, not attending this or attending that. And then next thing you know, she hasn't been very active in 20 plus years before she died. Laura says that her mother drank, she smoked, she ate red meat. She used to have an active social life, like I said, up until the last 20 or so years of living. And because she had an active social life, she also was getting regular mental stimulation. But for whatever reason, when it hit her, it hit her. Now, I don't know what type relationship she has with her brother. It was only 2 sentences where he was mentioned, and that was in the first chapter when she said that after graduating high school, he left and went to Florida, and he just built him a life there. And then the next time he was mentioned was when her dad called to tell him that their mother had died. So I don't know if they had a relationship because, like I said, the father remained in New York, the brothers in Florida, and Lauren and her husband and family are settled in Oregon. So I just get the impression that everybody was pretty much to themselves, pretty much now. Lauren herself, she sounds like she may have butted heads with both of her parents at different times throughout her life growing up. But when it all mattered in the end, she got her mom, she placed her in that facility, and I think she was there for about 8 months, and then her dad called and insisted that she bring her mother home. And she fought him at every turn. No, you're older now. You have issues. You don't have anybody to see about her. You don't want anyone in the house. You don't want to put her in a facility. Oh, she tried everything under the sun, but nothing worked. So she did go with her mother back to New York and got her settled in at the house. And to me, the reason her dad insisted on her coming back, for whatever reason, seems like sometimes when men get older, I don't care how much of a grouch they may be when they are, like in their prime of life, young adult, riding the ladder of success or whatever, climbing the ladder of success. He was just, she couldn't do anything right. Shoot, Lorna couldn't do anything right, or she felt she couldn't do anything right in her father's eyes. So, but at the end of the day, when he realized that woman had Alzheimer's, seems to be when he realized he really did love her and he just was not going to be okay without being in her life. And if it meant stopping everything, he had retired. And he could have done so much more, like I said earlier. And I don't know, that's just an impression I have. I think he just missed having somebody to need him or rely on him for everything. And after she took her mom home, her mother was there for 9 months. Then she died. And she said her dad called her and was like, your mother's dead. She said, that's one thing about my family. We don't mince words. We just, whatever it is. She said, then the dad called her brother and told him pretty much the same thing. Now, I know she went to the funeral, but she really didn't speak of whether or not her brother was there. I wouldn't be surprised. I hope he went, but I really wouldn't be surprised if he didn't, because there wasn't mention of him. Like I said, in the first chapter and in the last one, or, the epilogue. So this wraps up this book. Like I said earlier, I found it to be very informative. It was personal to me because I have it in my family, and now it's on both sides of my family. I've already lost my grandmother and her son. Oh, yeah. There was, when Lauren went to work at the facility, she went there, like I said, because she blamed herself she felt like she should have done more than she did once her mother was diagnosed. So after she died, she went to work at this facility called Maplewood. And she just described the co-workers and how she was privileged because most of the people that got hired the day she went, they all knew that this was the bottom of the totem pole. And she felt kind of bad because she didn't have to be there. She didn't have to work. Although she is a journalist, she didn't have to work. But she did, and she grew to know and become friends with a few people, and most of them left. Those type facilities have very high turnover rates. And so Maplewood was no different. I liked how she said that you could refer to the residents as patients because they were not in a hospital. This was not a clinical setting. It was built and designed. It was 14 different cottages, and so many cottages had like stage 1, which was the final stage when you're not expected to live. Although a couple of times some people beat it a time or two, but they did eventually pass before she quit working. And she went there supposedly to work for 2 weeks to learn the ins and outs, and she was just gonna let that be there. But I think she ended up working there for right at a year. And even when she eventually stopped working altogether, she still went back to visit. In her epilogue, she said that she still from time to time will go there, although none of the people, be it the residents or the workers, it's only one person at the end of this book that that was there when Lauren went to work there. So she walked away. She still, I think, beat herself up for not being there more than she was. But she learned so much about whatever her mother may have been going through just from working with these patients. And she got to know the family members of some of the patients. She even went to a couple of funerals. One, she went to that person's name in the book. Her name was Rose, but she was only 68, and she had Alzheimer's. Now, Rose was kind of she was a busybody. She was always taking stuff that wasn't hers. She was always in the wrong neighborhood. She was supposed to be in neighborhood 2, but she kept coming to neighborhood 3, which is where Lauren worked. In neighborhood 3 and 4, those people are the higher functioning Alzheimer's residents there. Yeah, they're higher functioning, but they still needed a lot of assistance with bathing, dressing, using the bathroom. A lot of them are being fed. Now you say, well, if that's the higher functioning, what's the lower? Like I said, the lower is, you're right at death's door. A lot of people do not resuscitate orders and things. So Laura, even after she stopped working every day, she would, I think maybe she slacked up one time to like 3 days a week. And the other 2 days, she still went because she had grown to care and love and had learned so much from being there. But Rose died, and she went to her funeral. Now, her obituary said that she had a husband, and I think she had 3 or 4 children, but not once during the whole entire time that Lauren worked at that facility had anybody at all came to see her. She didn't receive mails. She didn't get phone calls. It's like they just dumped her and went off. And when she went to the funeral, she said it was like like somebody just built a little church of plywood. Her coffin was about like a pine box, and the preacher really didn't know anything to say about her. So he asked if anybody had anything they wanted to say, like give her a eulogy. And she got to the funeral and saw where her boss and somebody else was at that funeral. But nobody got up and said anything. And she thought, that's odd. And she had grandchildren. So when Lauren went to work, that next day after the funeral, she was telling her supervisor, she was like, I noticed the preacher kept asking for anybody to say anything on behalf of Rose, and nobody said anything. And I couldn't get over the fact that she has a whole family and nobody bothered to check on her the entire time she was in here. And the supervisor said Rose's family, as bad and as annoying as Rose could be, the family was far worse. So in order for the preacher to say anything nice, they know it would have been a lie. But they were not surprised that the family didn't say anything. I thought that was so sad. All right, and then this elderly man, they called him Hayes. Now, Rose was 68 when she died, and I think Hayes was 94 when he died. And she had met one of his daughters and his wife. So she stayed in contact with them even after she stopped working. She went to the funeral, his funeral, and the difference was like between day and night. After going to whatever that was they did for Rose, and then seeing Hayes' funeral, and his family had asked her supervisor and her husband to perform, to sing a couple of songs at the funeral. And then her daughter would stay in touch with Lori after, her dad passed. And she would go back periodically also for different events at the facility long after her dad had died. And I think pretty much that wraps. Oh. There's one other detail that I meant to mention when I was talking about the stages of Alzheimer's. Working there, Lauren came in contact with different doctors. And she also, would meet different doctors, just her friends, when they went to school and stuff. They, knew people that does not live in most of our neighborhoods. Your doctors, your lawyers, stuff like that. And so she said that, she asked the doctor about why is it that people with Alzheimer's, or elderly people, that's what she said, why do elderly people seem to become very ornery or contrary when it comes to bathing? He told her that there is this working theory that says, as we all get older, our senses dull. That's normal, that's natural, that's with everybody. The difference between a non-Alzheimer's elderly patient and an Alzheimer's elderly patient is this. Oh, yeah. Yes, Alzheimer's sense is dull. And then so you don't see as well as you once did. You don't hear as well as you once did. Food might be off-putting to you. But one other thing is our skin thins as we age. And the doctor was saying that there is this working theory that due to our senses dulling for them and the thinning of the skin, they said one sense doesn't dull. In fact, it becomes heightened or amplified, and that is our sense of touch. So, with thinning skin and a hyper sense of touch, the least little thing you do bothers them, whether you're putting clothes on, taking them off, bathing them, that hurts them. And they can't tell you that it hurts. So they react, and some of them will go into fight or flight mode. So I thought, wow, they hadn't found out if that was actually the case, but I didn't know that your sense. It was clearly stated that this is in Alzheimer's patients where our sense of touch becomes more heightened. So you gotta. Now a lot of that makes sense to me, because if your sense of touch is acute now and your other four are not what they once were, yeah, that's going to make that sense of touch extra fortified, I would imagine. Well, it was a funny story to me. I went and I told my mom about this theory. And my mom was like, that has nothing to do with old people. I said, Mama, they didn't say that it was all old people. They said that it was people with Alzheimer's, and they can't tell us this, so they fight us. And my mom still just was not trying to hear, boy. She was like, honey, I don't know what you back there reading or why. But that just don't make sense. I say it don't make sense to you because you're thinking I'm saying that all old people are combative because they all have heightened sense of touch. And I'm telling you that this has been known mainly to Alzheimer's patients, and you're not one. So basically, if you get to the point where you don't want to blame, we'll have to find something else to blame it on. And my mama is extremely scary. Oh, she's scary. Goes to church, reads the Bible, but she's just real afraid of anything that's got to do with death. I'll talk about her more in another video, but that was just too funny. That whole week, I couldn't say nothing right. I laughed myself all the way to my room. I know about 3 nights in that 1 week. It was this about the Alzheimer's theory, and then someone gave me some perfume earlier that week, and I just could not stand the way it smelled on me. So I gave it to my daughter. And 2 or 3 days later, when she got ready for work, she said, "Mama, you smell this?" And I was like, And she gave me a wrist. I smelled it. I said, "What, is that what I gave you?" She said, "Uh-huh." I said, "Wow, now that's what it's supposed to smell like." But on me, it smelled like a little old lady going to church perfume. I was scared I was going to get put out of my own house. She said, "We don't smell like that." I said, "Mama, I never said you smell like that. And as long as we are living," because I have 3 sisters, "you will never be seen or found in public to be walking around smelling like that." I mean, it's just a real strong amber vanilla burn. I don't know. I just cannot describe it. But when I smell that, I automatically go back to church, because that's where I was most of the time when I was a little kid. That's what my grandmama didn't wear it. I never smelled it at home. My grandmother wore perfume. My mother wouldn't be old compared to her mom. But anyway, I said that. So then I was telling my sister, who's next to me in age, I'm the oldest. So I was telling her that. She said, "Yeah." She said, "Now, it's always, well, I think as long as I can remember it, I'll always identify that smell, because that's the way it was when we were kids, growing up, going to church." And she said, "Yeah, I agree. If we know Mama got something like that, it's going to come up missing. She won't be wearing it. That's all we know. So she won't be going out in public. Ain't nobody going to be talking about our mama smelling like a little old lady going to church." But anyway, book connectors, this wraps up this video. It was, like I keep saying, because it's true, it was very informative. And I think if you have a loved one, or you know someone you're close to with Alzheimer's, please read this book. There was a lot I kind of thought I knew, but I found out so much more. And I never really heard of narrative nonfiction, which is what this book was classified as. But I'm going to go back and see if I can find other books. Now, I did read a book about Alzheimer's, but this was a novel by, her name is Lisa Genova. Now, she writes a lot of books about sicknesses and diseases, because I read a book called Inside the O'Briens. And this told the story of a man who suffered from Huntington's disease. And he ended up passing that on to 2 of his children. That book was heartfelt and good. And I didn't know as much about Huntington's as I thought I did about Alzheimer's. Then she wrote another book called Still Alice. And that book dealt with Alzheimer's. And the reason I probably won't do a video on that book is because the only thing different between Laura's and hers, number one, this was fiction for Lisa. but a lot of the circumstances were all the same. This book, Still Alice, was about early onset of Alzheimer's. The main character, Alice, was diagnosed at age 50, and she passed it on to one of her daughters. And, yeah, just as long as you're willing to learn, you will. And that's all I have to say for this video, book connectors. I hope you got something out of it. Read it if you haven't. And then let me know what you think about it. Subscribers, once again, thank you so very much for being subscribed. Thank you so much. And visitors, please feel free to join us. We'd love to have you over here. And by all means, everybody, please like, share, comment respectfully. And by all means, make sure that you not only have your notification bells turned on, but make sure they're set to all so that you will receive every video I post. Should YouTube decide to grant me permission to upload a video. And book connectors, remember this: as long as there are books around, there is always something to read. And until we read again, book connectors, I want you to be safe out there. I hope you're having a wonderful weekend, and best wishes, best of luck next week when you go back to work, the first week of the new year. And you all, please be safe out there. And God bless.